Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallam ala sayyidil awwaleen wal akhirin. Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, this is another session in our look at minarets and thrones. And that is the relationship between scholars and the authorities, the umara. So it is the ulama and the umara. And these two sections of our leadership are crucial for the survival and the thriving of the Muslim Ummah. And we have looked at the scholars, the relationship, the positives and the negatives, and we realized that the ideal situation is that when the leader himself, the emir, is a scholar. And that is what we call fusion. That is the best possible situation because along with the authority that he naturally has, he would understand the revelation. And so the combination of the two gives us that sirat al-mustaqim, that straight path that we are looking for in our nation. The next relationship that we looked at is a leader who's not a scholar, but he has some consciousness and he relates to the scholars. So the emir or the khalifa in the early days, he cooperated with the scholars, and because of that they were able to develop a positive Islamic relationship, which of course reflected on the whole society and gives us what we are looking for in terms of Islamic governance. The next relationship that we are looking at between the ulama and the umara, that is one of conflict. And that is where the leaders themselves are not necessarily doing what is right all the time. The scholars have to take their position. And so a type of conflict develops. And this is something that is very frequent today in the Muslim world, where you have leaders who are kings and authoritarian rulers and who don't care about the Quran and the Sunnah and establishing Islam, and you have scholars who stand up to them. And so the precedent for this, or one of the basis for this understanding, comes through a hadith reported by Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, radiallahu anh. And he is one of the close companions to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said that كان الناس يسألون رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الخير وكنت أسأله عن الشر مخافة أن يدركني. So he said the people used to ask the Messenger of Allah about the good. And I used to ask about evil out of fear of it reaching me. So this is a different type of mentality that he has, because most people want to know about Jannah and they want to know good things and whatever. But Hudhayfa, he wants to know what is wrong. Okay, not just because he's into evil, but because he wants to protect himself. So Hudhayfa continues, I asked, O Messenger of Allah, we were living in ignorance and evil. Then Allah brought this good to us. Will there be any evil after this good? So what he means here is that ignorance is the time of Jahiliyyah. They were living in this time, and then you came. The prophethood came. The Quran came. But after this, all this good that happened to us, will there be evil? So the Prophet replied, he said, yes. Hudhayfa doesn't end there. Hudayfa continues to ask. That's how Hudayfa was. So then Hudayfa asked, or he said, then I asked, will there be any good after that evil? And the Prophet ﷺ replied, yes, but it will be tainted, fihi dakhan. It will be good, but it's tainted, like something wrong with it. Right? It's like having a nice mango, and the bottom side on the left is rotten. You can see it turn colors. It's not the whole mango. So you cut it off and still enjoy the mango. But something was happening now. And if that was let by alone, that rotten side would overcome the whole mango. So in this case, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that it will be tainted. The good will be tainted. So I asked, what will be its taint? He replied, a people who guide others to other than my sunnah. You will approve of some of their deeds and disapprove of others. Okay, so this is the precedent here. This is a long hadith, by the way. But this first section of it gives us a look at this kind of mixed leadership, where you're getting two signals. So it's good, but they're not guiding people to the sunnah like they want to be the king. They want to be the ruler. Their first option is not the sunnah. The first option is what they want. And if they can find the sunnah that meets it, then it's okay. And the Prophet did say to him that some of their deeds will be no good, and you will disapprove, but others will be good. So it's a mixture, and this is what Muslims find themselves in today in many of the Muslim majority countries, is that you have a ruler who does some good, but then there's other things that are not good. Okay, so what is the relationship now? Okay, so this is this sets the stage for this new relationship we're talking about. And the scholars, we have to remind ourselves that the ulama, that their position is to provide a type of moral authority. So the leader has physical authority. If you do wrong, he punishes. If the enemy comes, he defends. So he has sulta. He has moral, physical authority. But the ulama have moral authority because they are the ones who interpret the revelation. And so their authority is crucial on all levels because the Quran, the revelation, deals with all aspects of life. What is concerning us in our study would be more of what they'd call today the political side. So this is the relationship with the rulers themselves. And so therefore, that moral authority, when it comes to justice, establishing justice, upholding the truth, you see, this is the job of the ulama. If they see falsehood, they have to oppose it. If they see injustice, they have to stand against injustice. And they have to be strong, even though the odds might be against them, but the duty of the scholars is to stand up. So this is not easy. It's not easy at all. And this is the reason why the Prophet ﷺ actually said, al-ulama warathat al-anbiya. So he said that the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So literally the people who reach this stage of scholarship are standing in the position of the prophets themselves. And this is very important because this is the essence of an Islamic society. So what the scholars do, how they interpret it, and then how it's put into practice by the rulers, this will determine whether you have an Islamic society or you don't. And that's the reason why when you speak about the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, which is like the United Nations of the Muslim world, it's got 57 countries. where Muslims are the majority or a very significant part of the population. But unfortunately, none of them can be completely called an Islamic state. There are some that have more Islam than others. There are some where people dress a certain way, Islamically. They have Salat, regular Jummah. They have Eid, public. There's halal food. Okay, some societies don't allow alcohol and drugs to be sold in the society. But then other things happen, you see? And people might say, well, Saudi Arabia, and I have to be very straightforward. Even Saudi Arabia, that is not Jazirat al-Arab. It's not the original Arabia. It is Saudi Arabia. It's a political state governed by a family. And I remember being in Medina as a young student, and I was trying to save my money, to take care of my family and, whatever. And so then I would put my money, I said, let me put the little money I have in the bank. Okay, so then that way I can preserve it. And then after a month or so, I got a communication from the bank, and it said, okay, this is what you have. And it had my money and some extra money. So I said, what is this extra money? And he said in Arabic, fa'ida. And fa'ida means benefit. It's some benefit. I said, no, wait a minute. This is interest. Like you have given me, you took my money and you invested it. This is interest. Okay, so this is not benefit. This is like dara. This is harm. So I took my money out of the bank and I put it into a money lender. And that money lender, alhamdulillah, he did not take interest. And he, Jazahullah khair, his name was Sheikh Al-Rajahi. Al-Rajahi is a big person in Arabia. Rajahi Bank, because he started as a money lender in Medina. And he would hold people's money and no interest, whatever, give people a chance to keep their money protected without interest. And then he invested and he continued to work, and Allah blessed him until he became like a billionaire, where he had millions of dollars. And recently, the news came that, he gave up his millions of dollars. He gave it in sadaqah, in charity, to be given to the poor. And so he lost his status. They took him off the status of, millionaires, billionaires. They took Al-Rajahi off. But he is really a millionaire with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? But the point is, it was Saudi Arabia and it was an interest bank. So therefore, that's not an Islamic society. If the economy is basing itself on interest, it's not an Islamic society. And the scholars, technically speaking, would have to stand up against this. They would have to stand up. And they tried in the best way, and through the example of Rajahi and other people, it's spreading now even more in many Muslim countries. You have interest-free banks that are there. And so it is that moral authority that the scholars are supposed to live by. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah An-Nisa, you who believe, be persistent. Kunu qawwamina bil qist. Persistently stand firm in justice. Shuhada lillah. Witnesses for Allah. Even if it is against yourselves or your parents and relatives. Now, this is serious. Because for a lot of people, when it comes to your family, your parents, or your relative, that's when you stop. Because that's their tribe, or that's their family. But Allah is saying that the believers are supposed to stand up for the truth and justice under all circumstances. So that is the role of the scholars. And one of the great scholars who is an example of this for us is Imam Abu Hanifah. And Imam Abu Hanifah was known for his independence and very stubborn, strong person who refused to compromise, his religious principles. He lived under the Umayyad dynasty. Now remember, after the Khulafa al-Rashidin, 30 years, right? Then it became Mulk, kingdom. That's Umayyads. So the Umayyads ruled for around 100 years. And then another dynasty from Quraysh took over called Abbasids. Okay, so this is what this means. So Imam Abu Hanifa lived right at the end of the Umayyads when it turned into the Abbasids. There was a transition. Okay? And he was strong because he wouldn't be used by anybody. Okay, and that's the strong position he had. And just as an aside, because people might want to know a little bit about, his Islamic position, what he contributed, that this is not the subject of our course. You get another course on Abu Hanifa's fiqh, or Abu Hanifa's, what he did for Islamic jurisprudence. But he was, remember, he was just, they say he met Anas ibn Malik, he met one of the Sahaba. So, because Anas ibn Malik lived to be about 120 years old or something like that, from the blessing of the Prophet ﷺ. And so you could say that he's a tabi'i. You have Sahaba, and then you have tabi'in, and tabi'in. These like 3 generations, right? So he would be considered to be from the tabi'in. At that time, people had hadith, scholars were around, but there were no sets of hadith. The Quran itself had just really been codified. Okay, so they did have the Quran, the Uthman text. But in terms of the hadith, they didn't have hadith in books. So today you have Bukhari, you have Muslim, you have no, they didn't have that. So therefore, as a person who had to make decisions, because he was living in an area of Iraq, after the Quran itself and what you knew from the Sunnah or the Hadiths, you have to actually, you have to make some judgments. So you have to use your reasoning, your Islamic reasoning. And this was important because at that time Islam is spreading and it's going into areas that were not like Arabian Peninsula. So when you go into Iraq now, you are in the Persian, and you go into the Persian lands, the Turkish lands, okay, and then they start going north into Damascus. You are now going into different cultures. And so you're going to run across issues. And maybe the hadith didn't talk about it, or maybe it did, but you didn't get the hadith, because there's no hadith book, right? Today you can say, okay, I want to know about intoxication. So I turn on my hadith collection to the section on intoxication. Okay, but you couldn't do that in those days. So you have to make a judgment. You have to make a judgment. Okay, I can remember being in Medina, and we would get questions from the Muslims in North America and different parts of the world, ask the Sheikh this. And, I was in California for a little while. And California is a strange place with all types of drugs and all types of, immoral. It's a strange place. In any event, the Muslims, there was a thing called angel's dust. And this was a new type of drug that was on the streets. It's the same way just recently they had a drug called ecstasy. So ecstasy sounds like something really good. You're ecstatic. You're like super happy, right? It's a drug. So this drug was called angel's dust, and they would take the drugs from the embalmer's fluid, which they put in dead bodies, and they would snort this and go crazy. Okay, so they called it angel's dust. So they wrote to me and said, what does the Sheikh think about this? So I took it to the Sheikh, and Egyptian Sheikh from Azhar, and he said, okay, translate that. And I said, okay. Turab al-malaika, right? The dust of angels. That's the only way I could translate it. So the sheikh said, dust of angels, let me have some of that. Because everybody wants the dust of the angels, right? But then I explained to him what it was. He said, no. This is khamr. This is intoxicant. And it's haram. You see? So there's no hadith book to talking about angels' dust. He had to make like a qiyas, they call. Where you are basing it on something, it gets you intoxicated, so it's the same, so I classify it as khamr. You see, that's how Islamic reasoning. So Imam Abu Hanifah, he was really the first of the ulama, to develop a system of Islamic reasoning. And this Islamic reasoning is that you have texts, you have Quranic verses, you have hadiths, but then you have new situations, and you need a practical solution. So they later called it istihsan, okay, which is like, how you prefer things, how you choose things. Okay, so this istihsan is now part of the Hanafi school of thought. So if you were to study Hanafi fiqh today, then you would be taught about istihsan. Okay, but that's how it was developed in a very, simple way of looking at it. And so this was very important, especially for Islam. Remember, he is in the area of Kufa and Iraq, and now Islam is spreading into the Persian lands and then up into the Turkic lands. Okay, so therefore, his way of thinking, the rulers eventually, they took his way of thinking to be their system, because they needed a way to teach people how to pray, how to fast. You need like a system to do it. You can't just say, go to the Quran. There's no hadith book. So his rulings, his judgments, were later on made to be the judgments of all the leaders of the empires in those areas. It stretched to India. So now Pakistan, right? Afghanistan, all these areas up in there, these became, not because of Abu Hanifa, as you're going to see, because Abu Hanifa didn't deal with the rulers. Okay, if there was something wrong with the ruler, he's not going to necessarily accept it. But his students, Abu Yusuf and some of his students, they eventually worked with the rulers, and the rulers chose Hanafi school. And they taught it in all the madrasas. So now if you learn how to pray in those places, then when the Imam says in Maghrib, Walad Daalin, you say Ameen silently. That's Hanafi. Right? Whereas if you were Shafi'i, that's another great Imam, then they learn to say Ameen out loud. And there's proof for both sides. Okay, but this is how it developed. So this was very important to have how to reason Islamically. So you find Hanafi thinking was used by many of the judges, even in Shafi'i and in Maliki and other lands, because it's a system of reasoning. Okay, so yeah.
So when you talk about the flexibility in reasoning, what was happening before that was not flexible?
When Islam, the question is, why, if it's flexible in reasoning, what about before? Well, you see, when it was revealed amongst the Arabs. And so within Arab culture, there's a certain way of living. There's certain foods that you have, there's certain clothes that they wear. But now you're going into other lands. And there's totally different foods, different clothing, different lifestyle. You see, so therefore, if you try to use the Islamic Arab version, like for instance, you have a nice stove on and it's, white and it's very nice, and you go up on the mountain in Afghanistan in the wintertime, and you put on your thobe, right? You freeze to death. Because you're now in a land where you have to have woolen clothes. You see? So that's where the flexibility is. Because,
You were there, right?
what's that?
You were there, right? In Afghanistan?
Yeah, on the border areas. So therefore, that's the flexibility. That now Islam is spreading to different lands, fast. Right? So the scholars got to make decisions. Do you eat this? Don't eat that. You do this, you do that. So you have to have a reasoning system, and that's where Hanafi school was excellent. And he was a Persian person. His family was Persian. And there is some historical proof to say even that his father actually accepted Islam around the time of the Prophet. He was early revert to Islam. And so Abu Hanifa was raised in a Muslim family, but they were new Muslims. Okay? That's an interesting point too, right? Because a lot of people who are rigid about their families were the true Muslims. Their Imam, his father, embraced Islam. So his father at one point in time was a fire worshipper. Okay? They had Persian culture. They did not have Arab culture. You see? So this is very interesting. So now Abu Hanifa, he started off as a merchant. And he would sell cloth and whatnot in the marketplace. And he was known to be a very honest type of person, good businessman. And then he ran into, the scholars were coming. He was in the city of Kufa. And remember, Kufa and Basra are the two main cities in Iraq. So he was in Kufa. And he ran into this great scholar, Ahmad ibn Abi Sulaiman. And he was a great scholar. And so Abu Hanifa got attached to him and studied for him under him for 18 years, until he mastered the information from the Sheikh Ahmad. And Allah blessed him with his abilities, and he became a great scholar in his own right. Okay? So that's the basis of who he is. Now, during the time of the Umayyads and the Abbasids, there's power struggles going on. So therefore, they're not necessarily using the way of the Prophet. They're using the way of kings. Because remember the difference between Khalifa and the Malik, or the king. There's a difference between the two. And so, one of the things that they had, especially when the Abbasids came in, they needed to prove to people that they were true Muslim leaders. You had to prove it to people, because people were not sure about them. And one of the best ways is to have great scholars to be underneath you as your judge, as your qadi. So you surround yourself with scholars, and you have great judges. And so one of the Khalifas, Al-Mansur, he approached Abu Hanifa. And he wanted him to be not just qadi, but qadi al-Qudat. He wanted him to be the judge of judge, supreme judge. Today it would be Supreme Court judge. He wanted him to be. And Abu Hanifa answered him, and he basically said to him, I'm not fit for this job. Really inside, he didn't want to submit. He didn't want to be a stooge, right? Or somebody just used by the person, put into this position, right? But he answered to him and he said, I'm not fit for this. And Mansur continued on and said, no, yes, you are fit. Say you're fit. Trying to force him, right? And then Abu Hanifa said basically in words, if I was to say to you, after I told you I'm not fit, that I am fit, then that's proof I shouldn't get the job. Very intelligent. You got to be intelligent dealing with these kings, right? Because they like chop your head off and stuff, right? They were like, they were like serious. They were violent. But this Mansur, he didn't like this. He did not like this. So therefore, and this is our reality. A lot of people don't know this about their leader, Abu Hanifa, right? But Abu Hanifa was put into prison. And while he was in prison, he was actually tortured. And they beat him. They beat him repeatedly to try to make him accept loyalty to the king. to the Emir. And they continue. And Abu Hanifa refused to accept. He refused. And he stayed in prison for a period of time. And this is where he stands up as a great leader. And in 767, he died while in prison. This is a great Hanafi leader. A lot of people don't know that. But he died in prison. Some people say, we're not sure, he might have been poisoned. But he actually died in prison because he refused to be used by the king or by the emir, right? And he stood by his principles. Okay, so this is now where the scholar is opposing the ruler. And Mansur was not all bad. He was doing a lot of good things. People making Hajj, they're fasting, there's halal food, Islamic society. But is this power struggle, right? Abu Hanifa refused. And so he will be known for this, for his stance that he took. Independence of the scholar. He set the stage for other scholars that they should be independent, right? They should not submit to the rulers just because the ruler says so. And you have some scholars today, unfortunately, they will say, oh, you obey your leaders no matter what they say. You obey your leaders. You see them doing wrong. I'm not naming countries. But you see them introducing wrong, and where they don't say anything. Right? But the reality is, according to the hadith, you obey the leader as long as the leader obeys Allah. But if the leader does not obey Allah, then you don't have to obey them. So Abu Hanifa is a great testament to the strength of the scholars, and his teachings continue as one of the great imams, of the great four imams that we have. Another great imam is Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Malik. And he is known for what you call the Maliki school of thought. So you have Hanafis, and then you have Maliki school of thought. Okay? And his school of thought especially affected the Arabian Peninsula, but especially North Africa, West Africa. And when Islam was in Al-Andalus, which is Spain and Portugal, it also spread to that area there. So Imam Malik was born in 711 AD or CE. He was born in Medina. Like, he spends most of his life basically in Medina. And he was Yemeni. He was a Yemeni. Remember, the Yemenis today are strong, right? He was a Yemeni, right? And his family had moved from Yemen up into Medina. And he grew up, he's in Medina. So the scholars are there, and he's in this environment. And he got to actually study with many of the Tabi'een, and not Sahaba, because the last one had passed. So, but the Tabi'een, and he was very fortunate. And just to look at his approach, okay, a little bit about his fiqh, is that amongst his teachers, he had a number of teachers that are really important. But two important teachers, one is Nafi' Mawla ibn Umar. And Nafi' was the freed slave or bonded servant of the famous companion Abdullah ibn Umar. Okay? So he was like a servant. It's not slavery like today. But he came under, the rule, the possession of Abdullah ibn Umar. He freed him, right? And he became his right-hand man. Okay? And Abdullah ibn Umar was a great scholar. He is the son of Umar ibn Khattab. And so he was one of the great scholars after the early Sahaba. He's considered to be one of the, really strong scholars. And so Nafi' got his information directly from Abdullah ibn Umar, right? And so Imam Malik got his information from Nafi', okay? And so his chain of information, Just to show you isnad, because a lot of isnad sometimes sound like really long and stuff, right? His isnad, he would present a hadith, and he would say, this was reported from Nafi', who reported it from Ibn Umar, who reported it from the Prophet ﷺ. You see how close that is? So that is called the golden chain. Like his chain is one of the closest chains if you want to follow it. Okay? And that is the basis of his book called Al-Muwatta. So Al-Muwatta follows this golden chain coming from Nafi'. Another one of his scholars that we looked at in the previous class was Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri. And az-Zuhri, as we learned, was a great scholar who cooperated with the Khalifa Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And we studied that last class. And az-Zuhri, his systematic approach to hadith, he was the one that influenced people to actually codify hadith. Imam az-Zuhri was one of the key people. Okay, so he had an influence over Imam Malik, and Imam Malik codified. And so his book, Al-Muwatta, is the first codified book of hadith, even before Bukhari and Muslim. There's no Bukhari and Muslim at that time. Okay? And so, okay, but what's important to us now? What's important to us? What's important to us is the relationship with the rulers. Now, Imam Malik was low key. He taught his classes. He was in Medina, calm setting. Okay, but he was a very courageous person. And he was a person, he refused to be influenced by rulers. He refused. It's amazing, there's a story one time where a group came from Mecca, and the group leader said, we have some students, the Emir of Mecca wants you to teach these students, especially this one here, one in particular. And the Emir of Mecca, of course, you're talking about the Umayyads, period. So, so the Emir of Mecca wants you to teach Imam Malik, this person. So Imam Malik said, no, take him away. Then the leader of the caravan said, please, the Emir has specifically said, this person is a genius. Please. So Imam Malik said, okay, send the boy. So he sat the boy down with him in words, and he tested him and checked him out, and he said, I'll take the boy. Okay? You know who that was? That was Imam Shafi'i. Wow. Think about this now. You see how Maliki say, I'm a Shafi'i and you're a Maliki. He was his student. He was the best student of Imam Malik. That's what Imam Shafi'i was. And he actually improved on Imam Malik's school of thought. But he didn't separate it, right? He didn't disrespect him, right? He was a student. So that's how Imam Malik was. Now, you have your rule. The Abbasids take over. And they want everybody to now swear loyalty to them. You must swear loyalty to us. Now, Imam Malik had made a ruling, a fatwa. And it said that if you are forced to do something, if you're forced to take an oath, or if you're forced to do a marriage contract, it's not valid because it was done by force. So anything done by force is invalid. So now there's an issue here because this is the issue of bay'ah. And the bay'ah is the oath to the Khalifa. Okay? And they're forcing everybody to do it. But the fatwa of Imam Malik said that anytime you're forced to do something, it's not valid. So when they try to force the people in Medina, and the students of Imam Malik who knew him, they said, no, Imam Malik's fatwa is clear. Like, you can't force us to accept you. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But you can't force us. So now they came now on Imam Malik, and they said, okay, what is this? So the Umayyad governor of Medina, excuse me, it's the Umayyad governor of Medina, Ja'far ibn Sulaiman, he ordered Imam Malik, because Imam Malik refused to change his fatwa. I'm not going to change it for you because you're the leader. So they ordered for him to be publicly flogged, beat him publicly. This is Imam Malik, man. This is your Maliki school of thought, right? The great leader, the Muwatta. To beat him publicly. Imam Malik, no. Imprison him. Imam Malik refused. They even pulled his arms until the arm came out of the socket. Okay, and they said that at some points Imam Malik, when he prayed, he had to pray with his hands on the side. Now, some people claim, in the struggle against madhabs, they say that's why Malikis prayed like this with their hand on the side, like the Shia, because Imam Malik was wounded, right? He couldn't raise his arms. They were pulled out. But the Malikis would say, no, we have proof that there were people amongst the people of Medina who actually prayed like this with their hand on the side. It's not because of the injury. Okay? But Imam Malik held his position. And eventually he was released, and he leaves a great legacy. Number one, that, he is authentic. And when he brings his hadiths, he's bringing you probably the most authentic chain of information that you can have. So he sets the stage for all the other people who are going to come afterwards in terms of what, your chain, what you want your isnad to be. He also was independent. He had high integrity. He refused to submit to oppression of the leader. If the leaders were doing what is right, he has no problem. But if they're forcing him to do something, then he will not do it. So this is the great Imam Malik, another example of this amazing legacy. The third Imam that we're looking at tonight is Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah. And this is the fourth. We've already mentioned Abu Hanifah, Malik, Shafi. So the fourth of the four great schools is Hanbali school. Okay? And Imam Ahmed was highly respected, strong person in traditions. He follows the traditions. And he has a great influence up until today. Who was Imam Ahmed? He was born in 780 in Baghdad. So he was Arab tribe, the Shayban tribe. Okay? So he was born in Iraq. His father died when he was young, so he was raised by his mother. And his mother had a knowledgeable person. So she supported him. She saw that he was inclined toward knowledge, and then set him with the ulama from an early age. And so he was able to study under some great leaders who were there and great teachers. So he had a really great education. Plus the fact that now he was different than Imam Malik. Imam Malik stayed in Medina. But Imam Ahmed traveled. So Imam Ahmed traveled to Kufa, Basra, Mecca, Medina. He even went down to Yemen, Syria. So he traveled all around meeting scholars. So he was able to meet with many of the great scholars, and he was able to collect hadiths. So remember the codifying, system was already there. So now he is the one who's sweeping. He's sweeping the area, and he's codifying information. And one of his teachers, look at the chain now. One of his teachers is Imam Shafi. Okay? So now how you say, I'm a Hanafi. I remember one time the brother came to me and said, can a Hanafi marry a Shafi? That's what he said to me. Can a Hanafi marry a Shafi? I said, wait a minute. These are teachers and students of each other. How can you say something like this? That's how divided we've become. Like, if you're a Hanafi, you must be an Indian or a Pakistani. If you're a Shafi, you're a Somali or a Yemeni. You know, if you're Hanbali, you're from Saudi Arabia. You know, if you're Maliki, you're North African or Nigerian. We made it into tribalism. But it's not tribalism. And it was never supposed to be. And so he studied under Hisham ibn Bashir, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, right? Great scholars of hadith. And so he was really into hadith. You know, and by that time, there was a lot of collections out there now. There was a lot of information. And so he was able to go deep into the study of hadith. So remember, Abu Hanifah, his system, there's not that many hadith around. You have the Quran, some hadith. You got to use your reasoning. Okay? Imam Malik, he also used Amal Ahl al-Medina, the actions of the people of Medina. He considered that almost like a hadith. Because these were the tabi'een.
Where you grew up there?
He grew up in Medina. So he considered their actions to be like a hadith. If there was 50 of them doing something, then it must be right? So that becomes part of the Maliki school, you know, of thought. But Imam Ahmad, he was very strict in terms of the Quran, and he wants to go directly to the Prophet ﷺ. You know, he used qiyas, he used analogy, he used, you know, other things, but he would prefer a hadith. He'd prefer a hadith. You have the Quran, and it's an issue. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? Okay? Now, because he traveled so much, his book of hadith called the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, it's a collection of 30,000 hadiths. Like if you put it on your bookshelf, it's like huge, right? 30,000 hadiths he collected. Imagine how much time he had to spend. I mean, we don't even have enough time to read 30,000 pages of books. He's collecting the hadith, compiling them, putting them in the Musnad, okay? And it's not, you know, as authentic as, say, the Muwatta or Bukhari or Muslim, but it has he brought in, you know, those hadith. So therefore, for just about every subject, every issue in the Hanbali school of thought, you can get a hadith. So this is why the Hanbalis, they are called Ahlul Hadith. And this name now is being used by a group that's in the Muslim world called Salafi. So the Salafi group, really, this use of Salafi, how it's being used today, it's only in the past, you know, few decades, people. Before that, it would be Ahlul Hadith. So it's the people who, Hanbalis, because they prefer to have an authentic hadith over somebody's opinion. Even if the hadith was not that strong, it's a little weak, they'd rather have that than somebody's opinion. Okay? So this is now what's concerning us. What's concerning us is the trial and the imprisonment, the mihna, the inquisition. Now, Imam Ahmad, his life was in the Abbasid period. So the Abbasids were ruling with, you know, their force. They were ruling. And in the 9th century, the Khalifa called Ma'mun, okay, he's a strong Khalifa. Again, remember our hadith in the beginning. They're good, but there's something tainted. Okay, but they do a lot of good. That's how he is. Because he does a lot of good. Beit al-Hikmah, all the science and all the stuff is under his rule. But there's something tainted. His taint was this philosophical movement called Mu'tazila. Okay, and this Mu'tazila movement, it goes back to the time of Al-Hasan al-Basri. So this is the Tabi'een. And one of his students, Wasil ibn Atta, he disagreed. Like there was a question that said, okay, if a person commits sin, he commits adultery or he drinks alcohol, is that person still a Muslim? So Al-Hasan al-Basri said the person's still a Muslim. They're just a fasiq. And Wasil didn't like this, right? And he separated. This is sort of it's almost like a Khawarij way of looking at things, the people who went outside of Ali. So he left and he got into his own group, and they started their own philosophy. And now they were influenced heavily by Greek and Roman philosophy. Because remember, during this time, all types of philosophies were being translated into Arabic. So you have Socrates and you have Plato and all these things translated into Arabic. Okay? So this movement called Mu'tazila, okay, and it comes from i'tizal, which means they separated from Imam Hasan al-Basri. So this group, they had some different positions, okay? And one of their positions that they had is, and this is the main controversy, this is a minor point that should never be a big thing. But the point is that is the Quran Kalamullah? Is it the words of Allah? Or is it a creation? So is the Quran like a creation?
Are we talking about the physical book?
No, I mean originally it wasn't a physical book,
Yeah.
but even the words themselves, which came into a physical book, but even before that, is that Kalamullah or is it a created thing? Are these words a created thing? And their argument, they argue, say, well, if you say it's Kalamullah, then to speak, you got to have a mouth. If you got a mouth, you got a head. So you're saying Allah is a man. Like this philosophical argument. But Imam Ahmad's position is, this is the Kalam Allah. It is not created. Allah sent this down. How Allah did it, only Allah knows. It's obviously not like human beings. Because the Quran says, Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing like Allah. So there's no tongue and there's no head. Okay? But it's a philosophical argument. It gets into egos. And my movement against your movement. You see? And so they reached the Khalifa. And the Khalifa took on this philosophical movement. And he started to, he said, I want all the scholars to accept Mu'tazila. If you don't, I'm going to punish you. So many of the scholars, agreed, but there was a group of them, they disagreed. And some of them were actually put into this caravan in chains, whatever, and brought to the capital. Imam Ahmad refused. Okay, and this is a great Imam, known by so many people. But he refused. He said, bring me proof. What's your dalil? Bring me something from the Quran. Bring me something from the Hadith. If you don't have proof, no. And he refused. And he was also punished. He was beat so bad, he went unconscious. These are your imams, right? It's not easy to be an imam, right? Because you're standing for the truth, and shaitan is so powerful amongst people, right? You got to be strong. So he stayed in jail for like 2 years. But he was so beloved by the people that when the Mujahideen were out fighting, they were calling Imam Ahmad's name. And the leadership changed. So when the leadership changed, Imam Ahmad came out, and a celebrated Imam, and he gives us a powerful legacy. And they say that he saved the Ummah. Abu Bakr saved the Ummah in the beginning. Remember when the people went outside of Abu Bakr? And they said after him, Imam Ahmad saved the Muslim Ummah. Because this philosophy was about to overcome destroy our connection, with Quran and Sunnah. And Imam Ahmad stood his ground. So he is a central, important person, resilience, strength, and one of our great Imams. So these are three examples of the struggle that goes on between the rulers and the scholars. Okay? This is our example. I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have concerning this group. Question?
Can you talk a little bit more about how the Mu'tazilite philosophy ended and how he put a stop to it? Because after he went to jail, did the people take his side?
Yes. So many people naturally took the position of Imam Ahmed, but people in the government and the other people there were forced. A movement started by one of the Mu'tazila, and this is Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari. And Ash'ari, he was into this philosophy and everything, and then he repented from this, and he developed a system of argumentation, how to defeat the Mu'tazila in an argument. And that's called today Ash'ari school of thought. So if you get into these debates about Aqidah, right? So they'll say Salafi, Ash'ari, whatever. The Ash'ari school, their leader was originally Mu'tazila. But then he left it, and he developed a way where you could logically argue against these people. Imam Ahmed and them, they didn't argue against them. They just said, bring me proof. If you don't bring me proof, I don't want to hear you. But that's not enough for some people. Some people need some kind of argumentation. So Imam Ash'ari, he developed this system. He's Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And, but some people say that because he had so much in him that it even influenced his philosophy slightly. And this is where you'll have an argument between Salafis and Ash'aris. It really shouldn't be a major argument. It's very hair-splitting points on the names and descriptions of Allah and things like this. Shouldn't be a major thing. Azhar University is Ash'ari. Azhar, Egypt, and many universities. So it really shouldn't be, and it isn't really, a major difference, but small-minded people, turn it into a difference there. The key point that we're looking at is about Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Abu Hanifah, Imam Malik. Questions?
The student who started the Mu'tazilite philosophy, what was his name again?
His name was Wasil ibn Ata. Wasil ibn Ata. He was a student of Al-Hasan al-Basri.
Question. You said Imam Malik prayed with his hands on the side, right?
Yeah.
So it had to be during the Prophet's time. He did that too, or did the Prophet?
According to the Maliki school of thought, I'm not Maliki to know the details.
No, just saying, the Prophet did that when he was praying Salah. Did he pray anytime he said? So he adopted that.
They claim that amongst the Sahaba were those who prayed like that.
Okay.
And it was the actions of some of the people of Medina, and that's why they do it. Okay? But amongst the Malikis, the ones who are there's a correction of the Maliki madhab.
Okay.
And the correction of the Maliki madhab is that the overwhelming hadiths, all the hadiths that are authentic, say that he's holding his hand in the qabat. Right? So even Malikis now pray. But you'll see some Malikis pray like on the side.
That's the reason I asked you. I had a visit, a guest came by me, right? It was Salah time, and we were praying.
Yeah.
And he had his hand inside, and he told me, this is the way you pray, right? I said, whatever you pray, as long as you pray to Allah, right? I'm not here to judge, right?
Where was he from?
He's from Yemen.
From Oman?
Yemen.
From Yemen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that the Omanis,
Okay.
it's not Yemen, it's Oman, right?
Okay.
But the Omanis also pray with their hands on the side.
Yeah. I think he's from that. Yeah.
But they're ibadis.
Okay.
That's the Ibadis. That's another group, Khawarij.
Okay.
They're the remnants of the Khawarij movement that left Ali and, they pray like this too.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I was confused one time. I was in Zanzibar. I was traveling in East Africa. And we went to the masjid. And one of the brothers came in he was standing on the side, and he went like this, with his hand on the side. So I said to the brothers, is this a Shia? And they said, no, it's Ibadi. So Ibadi is considered not in Ahl Sunnah, right? Not in Shia. It's Khawarij. Although they say the Ibadi has now changed their madhab. And they have now, Shafis are there too. If you go to Oman, there's Ibadis and Shafis, they're all together. Okay? But, so there's a lot of people who pray with their hands on the side to show that there is some proof that it's real. So the argument that it only because the Imam's arms, I've heard rebuttal to that argument. It's not, they have more of a proof, but the strongest position now in the correction of the Maliki madhab is fold your hands. Any questions online?
Question. Which madhab is the best one to follow and closest to the Sunnah?
Okay, which madhab is closest to Sunnah? This is another class that you need. All of them are Sunnah. So Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, all of them are great Imams, and their teachings are, all Sunnah. Nobody can really say which is closest. You can argue this and argue that.
But they never contradict each other because
There's some differences of opinions.
Yeah,
There are
they
differences.
never contradict.
But in the major usul, the major foundations, there's no contradiction. No. Ameen out loud, Ameen silently. You're sitting in tashahhud. Do you go like this? Or do you wiggle like this? Maliki is this? Or they hold it straight? There's proof for both. So it's okay. So keep your mind open, for all the different, aspects of the Sunnah. But naturally, the area that you live in, the system of your Imam and your family, and that, you basically follow that system. Okay? The only time you can really start following all the systems, you have to be a mujtahid. You have to be a person who's on a high level and can, choose. So everybody sort of follows a madhab, but don't get stuck in the madhab.
But a quick question, like if you travel and you end up in that situation like that, like a Maliki masjid, and they prostrate like that, you should follow suit?
Yes, I mean, I heard from a great scholar, he said that when you're in the lands of other, Ahl Sunnah, pray like them. Because otherwise it causes a confusion.
Yeah, because then you're going to be noticed after you, right? You'll be standing out.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the Caribbean once. I don't want to say which place. But I was in the Caribbean. You might know because of my background. But we were in the masjid. And the Imam read really nice, Maghrib. He said, Wala Dali. And I said, Ameen. I was the only one in the mosque.
I've been in that position before in Hanafi mosques.
Yeah.
Especially like in the women's side where when it comes to Will Daldin, I'll say Ameen, but I say it out loud and I'm the only one who said it out loud.
That's right. So now when they finished Salaam Alaikum, they said, where's that shaitan? And they came to me to try to, I said, get the Bukhari hadith. And I said, read it in the front. And it said, the Sahaba said Ameen so loud, it shook the building. They said, we didn't know this, man.
I'm living with you, right? And you go to the
Didn't know,
masjid there, right? They found a strict Hanafi school of thought. They won't say Ameen Lord, like how we say it.
Yeah, so it's better just to, just don't say it out loud. It's not.
They give a bayan before they give the khutbah. What are you going to do?
It's okay. It's okay.
Say it, right? So you can't make criticism, right?
Yeah, it's all right as long as, because there's some broad ways of doing things. That's fine. Question online?
That was it.
So there's many ways, but the key thing for us here is the relationship of the scholars to the rulers. That's the key thing. And now we see another type of relationship that developed.
I'm just a little bit more interested to know about like the Mu'tazilite philosophy, and when Hassan al-Ashari prepared the arguments against that philosophy, can you give me some examples of what they were?
Yeah, it's not really, that's a little deep for this class. You know, and I'm not an Ash'ari, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know,
Were his arguments against the philosophy like modern day Ash'ari philosophies?
yeah, I mean, his arguments was to explain the wrong positions of the Mu'tazila.
Yeah.
How to explain it, how to reason with them, and to show them that they're wrong. Okay? So this is what his argument was. His basis is Quran and Sunnah.
Yeah.
But there is a philosophy that's there. And it can be used, originally it was used to defend Islam. But then later on over years it became the philosophy of the Ash'aris. And you will learn that, you know, in Aqidah. So you learn certain things, you know, in Aqidah, you know, from the Ash'ari thing. But they're not major issues. They're more philosophical, like ilm al-kalam, you know, it's philosophy.
Yeah.
And it's not areas really where of importance.
So because I'm not trying to learn more about like the difference between like Athari or Ash'ari or something like that. I'm more interested to know about like what was the Mu'tazilite philosophy that he started, you know, he started preparing those arguments against them. Like, well, I can't imagine what those arguments against them were. Because like if the philosophy was like Greek and Roman, like philosophy was influencing them,
Yeah.
then was it like a certain mindset that he taught the people to question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of it. But the basis of it, you know, is the Greek and Roman philosophy, where they try to logically reason everything out. And there's some things that you cannot logically reason out. That you know, that we believe. We believe Allah is above the throne. You know, and you know, you can't, but some of the people will say, no, you can't say, you know, above, because that's a direction that he's in, and you know, like they get into this high philosophy, and maybe at another point we could discuss it. But this particular class is dealing with the political side of the relationships. Okay, so we'll close there, and we'll have another interesting class next week, inshallah, dealing with another relationship. Maybe we'll look at a positive relationship, how the leader cooperated, you know, with the Imam, and great results came from their cooperation. So I leave you with these thoughts. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.